alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a new guest of the podcast, William Gensburger. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Tim. Glad to be here.
It's good to have you. So, William, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the sort of stuff you write.
Okay, well, I am obviously a writer, and before that I used to work with writers and put out a magazine called Books and Pieces Magazine for a number of years. And before that, a journalist and a bunch of other things. I think the only thing I haven't been is a brain surgeon.
That's funny. That could get me off on a tangent right away. But anyway, it's just this amazing, especially because your book is involves some thriller murder elements, correct?
Correct, yes. Texas Dead. It's a murder mystery with a very strong female lead, a detective named Maxie Michaels, and she is a force of nature by herself.
Cool. So it's kind of funny. I just to get off on this tangent initially, because it is kind of the thing that's stuck in my head at the moment. But I've been watching this show, rewatching actually, this old animated show about. It's not that old really. It's like 15 years old. It's not that old by the standards of animation, but whatever. Called Monster, which is basically epic mystery thriller, but the main character is a brain surgeon by trade. Anyway,
well, I might have tried it if anybody would let me. But.
It's a pretty funny, yeah. It's just a funny coincidence there, funny cross paths in my head there.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah, exactly. So, So, what's Texas Dead about? Besides, I mean, it's a detective mystery, murder mystery stuff. What is there? Do you have any twists on the whole concept, or is it? Yeah, what do you do exactly?
It's funny you ask. Yeah, I actually, after I started writing it, and came up with the title Texas Dead, and it was pretty close to getting it finished. And somebody goes, "Well, is it about the murders that took place in Texas?" And I'm like, "No."
Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it. I chose the name because there are other novels called Dead Texas, and I didn't want it to stand out on the list. So I thought, well, let me switch it around. It had a little catchy part to it. No, it's about a series of murders that have taken place. It's actually not gruesome at all. And I don't really go into much in the way of graphic detail as far as the murders, because really it's a character-driven novel. But a series of murders taking place in Corpus Christi, and Maxie Michaels, who's a bit of a celebrity detective. Everybody knows her. She's the kind of detective who's always dressed well and knows everybody and has connections. And her partner is a Jamaican guy. I call him the even keel, Kobe Jameson. And together they're trying to solve what's going on. And so the book actually opens with the discovery of a new victim, and it proceeds from there. She winds up finding an emergency card in case of emergency, call Devin Parker.
No.
And so that introduces the third character who's in the book. And from there it goes, it starts out just as a murder mystery, who done it, and then starts taking twists and turns as things get a little bit more complex, and then of course, their lives are in danger, and
yeah.
Will they die in the end?
Oh, so it's we got that classic thriller build-up kind of thing going on. Yeah.
It is, except this book is very character-driven.
Okay.
I think one of the compliments that I've been getting from most of the people reading it is how realistic the characters are, and that's I take that as a compliment. These are people that you kind of want to hang out with if you ever met them at a party. And they each have their own distinctive personality, and it sort of drives the book forward. The worst critic I had actually gave me a compliment saying, "Yeah, I was reading your book and didn't think I'd like it, and I kept putting it down, but then I kept going back to it, couldn't figure out why I kept picking it up." And it was only after halfway he realized, well, he got suckered into the characters and really liked them and wanted to see what was going to happen. So.
Oh, that's great. That's a critic, huh? It sounds like it got pretty good reception.
Yes, absolutely. So, and it was fun. It's a lot of details and. But as far as what sets it aside is, I would say the characters. There is a second book in the work which is not set in Texas called American Dead. which will be set in Los Angeles with the same characters. It continues the story, but by book 2, I don't have to focus so much on the character development because they really are pretty well developed in this book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to remind people and get into their heads still, but I see what you mean there. Yeah, it's one of those tough things. Like when I write in a series, I mean, my main series are fantasy, and it's tough for me because when I'm introducing characters, like, oh, I know how to do this, but I'd never written a series before this recent the recent fantasy books I've been writing, and so I'm like, oh. It didn't even occur to me that I should go back and reintroduce the characters at the beginning of each book. Because, you need to read the first one. But I did get one critique about it, one criticism about it in a review. It's like, I really didn't understand the characters from the previous books.
Yeah.
Because this is the person who didn't read book 1. Oh, no. Yeah.
Details are really difficult to keep track of. Little details. It can be, yeah. Oh, my. I have people who look at the manuscripts as we're going through them. A friend of mine and authors, and constantly they say, "Oh yeah, you got your time sense wrong." I'm putting in, "That was yesterday we did this." No, it was 2 days ago. And I'm like, I'm writing the book, but you know how the sequence is supposed to go.
Isn't that
also,
funny?
Characters, I keep messing up. Who's driving what car? Usually catch those later, but don't you find the details are the things that really trip you up the most?
Definitely. I was going back to one of the earlier books in the series today because I'm writing book 4, and I'm going back to through book 3, and I'm like, okay, so what was the name of this horse? It was very similar to the car thing, I think, except that I realized I didn't name the horse. I don't know the horse's name, so that's perfect.
So do you keep notes on track all this?
Not really. I mean, I usually make all my files. I make each series its own Scrivener file. So I put them all up in the same document so I can search the whole thing if I need to. Right. But then it's tricky if I don't make a word. If for looking for a specific name that's only going to appear like once or twice in a book, is tough. And that's why I'm glad I didn't do it. I had to comb the chapters where this horse is involved. I'm like, this is because the main character had just gotten this horse, and I mean she still has it in book 2 and before. But it's kind of this weird, I realized that. I guess the horse. I never named the horse, so I get a chance to do that now if I want to.
Dog.
Yeah, maybe.
Son, boy.
And the funny thing is, because she's not a horse person. Like the main character of this series, she's never ridden a horse very often. She was a commoner basically, so she didn't know how to ride a horse. Right. And then she ends up riding this giant woolly destrier, basically. Anyway. Because it's winter in book 3. Anyway, that's how it rolls. But those books are actually kind of tough because the Demon Hunter series, because so far they've all taken place basically in the same year time frame. Just about. It's been like every couple months we have another novel, which is, I don't know if I like that very much. I kind of and I'm going to turn this into a question, so bear with me for a second.
Sure.
Because it's one of those things that when I get stuck in a story, it's usually because I get stuck in time, and I'm thinking like, oh, I've got to keep going at the same pace. It's got to be like the next minute or the next hour or whatever. It needs to get covered at roughly the same amount of space on the page as the previous section. And I think that's kind of, and that's not something that's, but when you're writing fiction, you don't have to do that. You can always breeze past stuff, like you were saying before. It could be a day, it could be 3 days, and you can establish that very quickly through different methods.
As long as you get it right.
Exactly. As long as you remember what you did. Right. So when you do that kind of thing, do you ever have trouble with that? Do you ever have trouble?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What I found, I got bogged down with that when I started, and I realized, forget it and just write. In other words, don't decide the chapter is going to end here. Get the writing done, and then go back and read it. And when you read it, then it becomes obvious where those transitional points become.
Yeah.
Which is contrary to what I think everybody tells you. Plot it out. This is going to be in chapter 1. You got to follow this arc and this pace. And I don't know. I kind of think that the story, once it's written, I think it dictates its own pacing, and then of course as you edit and revise, you're going to adjust the breakpoints.
Absolutely,
it's difficult. Yeah. It's difficult, and I don't like things that bog me down and make me go, well, should I have done this or should I have done that? I know a few people who write a chapter and they go back and dissect the chapter until it's perfectly ready to be published, and it's like,
oh, I couldn't do that. I mean, getting nowhere with that.
Exactly. And by the time you get to chapter 13, chapter 2, you're going, I should have just changed that, and I'm going to go back and do that right now. I'm going to change what I wrote.
There's some writers who can get away with that. Dean Wesley Smith and his cycling techniques and stuff like that. They can get some authors are experienced enough or have enough just confidence that they can do that kind of thing. I'm not that way, and I was brought up to revise a lot, but I try to revise a little less these days than I was kind of suggested, because I got an English major in college, so I know all about editing at this point.
Yep.
and and it's a little frustrating to look at when I'm told nowadays, like, or I tell people, like, yeah, I only do like 3 passes on the book, maybe 3, and they get lighter and lighter.
Yeah.
Every time. The first one, there, is the edit or after the rough draft. So I do the rough draft, and then I do not quick, but then I reread the whole book and I make the big substantial changes, and then I go through and I do some polishing drafts, basically. Right. That take a lot less time because I use I use software and stuff like that to find the problems a lot of the time. I have it listen to it out loud is the main polish though. But anyway, it's one of those things that, but that all takes, I can do all that in a week for a book if I really put my mind to it. And people are like, you should just spend more time on it. I'm like, I did spend a lot of time. I spent 20 hours that week on it.
Right. Yeah, and I think also once you have something substantial to look at, it's a different take when you do go back on it versus a segment.
Yes.
If I just look at a chapter, I'm not really getting the scope. By the time you've written 3/4 of this book, you've got a flavor and a tone, and it comes out that way. You might, and I've read many authors that say the first 50 pages are garbage, throw them away, because they say you're starting, you've got all these different ideas, and they don't quite work, and by the time you get in the midsection of the book, it's not at all like those first 50 pages. So,
yeah, some people say that.
I don't know.
I mean, it depends on the author, probably. I tend to add something at the beginning of the book, and I have thrown out a few substantial. I've done some substantial cutting on some of the books, but mostly I just add a new. I usually add a new first chapter, a new first scene, because I usually start a little late. That's kind of my habit, and I'm like, I need to go back and ground this and make it a little bit more. I think the only one where I started kind of exactly where I wanted to. Well, kind of. This is actually not true at all, because I threw out the whole first draft of this book. It was 80,000 words long. But on the draft I finished, for Shadow Prince, this is the second book of my Demon Hunter series, I wrote the first scene first. But again, I'd already written 80,000 words, so that's kind of different. I wrote this is a different situation. Right.
And then the beginning is really important. An author friend of mine, actually somebody you should interview, Mike Wells. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I've not heard of him, no.
He's on Twitter, Mike Wells author. He's very prolific. And for a long time when I was helping other authors and reviewing their work, I had asked him, I said, he's got a series of books. The first one, Lust, Money, and Murder, book 1, had a prologue, which was about 5 pages long. And in those 5 pages, he captured absolutely everything. It was probably one of the best 5 pages that I've seen. Identified the characters, gave you enough information about the characters' location, somewhat on the plot, and literally brought you to a cliffhanger, all in those 5 pages.
Beautiful.
It was very nice. And I said to him, can I use that? And when I get people and I'm giving them critique on their work, can I send them a copy of that? And he was like, yeah, fine, perfectly fine. I've always maintained that those first pages, doesn't have to be 5 pages, but the first couple of pages have to be killer. And I often go to a local Barnes & Noble bookstore, and I'll go through and I'll flip open and just read the first pages of people. And you can tell right off the bat, this book's going to grab me, this book's not going to grab me.
Yeah,
I don't want to see the flowers were
Yeah, definitely steer clear of the passive voice, especially in those first 5 pages.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things, like, you don't steer clear of the passive voice just because passive voice is bad or whatever. It's not arbitrary. The effect on your prose is killer. It is lethal. It will just it just, at least for me, it destroys when I'm reading a story. I could run into a patch of passive voice. It's 2 sentences long, or even 1 sentence, and I'm done here. I checked out immediately because I'm that. I have ADHD. I can't stick around if I'm not being pulled in.
Well, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking passive voice means nothing's really happening in the story, which isn't true.
That's true, but it's this arbitrary, like, I mean, obviously there's the right times to use it, right? But there's this amount of just, if you're just like doing suddenly a pastoral description in passive voice, like, careen to a halt, you know?
Right. Yeah. My other, and I don't know if you do this, and most authors do, where you'll carry your story along, and then the chapter ends, and then the next chapter is the B story or secondary story, and usually not interesting enough, and not especially after you're on that first part. And I'm like, to heck with this chapter. I'm going to skip on. I'm going to skip ahead now until I get to the story. I want the meat of the story. And so one of the things that I made sure that I was doing in this book was not having that. I want you to go through this book pretty quickly, and I don't want you to feel like I'm distracting you with unnecessary information. So, and I think that also goes to play a lot in terms of keeping your interest and keeping the readers turn the page and actively involved in it. And I've gotten that back in the feedback from a lot of people, so I think that worked.
Yeah, it's tough to do, though. I mean, making a story kind of everything has being relevant to the main plot it's easy with one point of view. I think or relatively easy. But then when you start introducing multiple point of views, this was kind of the problem I had when I started writing the fantasy stories that were epic, and so they need multiple points of views, kind of by genre. And the story either ends up being very intricate but tightly wound, or it becomes sprawling and just kind of impossible for me. I mean, as a reader, I'm mostly talking about books like The Wheel of Time. I can't stand The Wheel of Time. I know, but I shouldn't say that. I probably shouldn't. I'm already getting executed. Whatever. Too late. It's going out. But I don't cut stuff from this show. I'm not cowardly enough to say that I don't. That I like Wheel of Time and then cut it. But I don't like The Wheel of Time and then cut it because it's true. I just can't. Couldn't get into that series. But because once the point of view started switching, I'm like, what am I doing here? Are these characters important? Are they not? I can never tell.
And that's the key, isn't it? They really do have to be important. If you're gonna bring it in, it's got to be relevant, and they've got to be. Obviously, they don't necessarily have to be 100% with the primaries, but they have to be close.
Yeah, exactly.
And in a complex book, in a complex novel with a lot of characters, obviously, everybody's going to intersect at some point in the storyline. So you're building it up. And I'm talking about just fluff. A lot of times, you get a lot of fluff, unnecessary dialogue. Let's sit down and have a cup of tea while we sit down and discuss this now. Don't need the tea.
Yeah, it's like the Jim Butcher blog post about scene and sequel, but you don't need that much sequel. You don't need that much thinking about what just happened or just sitting around having a tea party. And then, I mean, depending on your genres, maybe a tea party is the action of the book. But
I think a lot of people will write that way because if you don't, then your book is pretty small.
Yeah, it's true. But that's the thing we don't have to be worried about these days.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so if you... how long is Texas Dead, then? I guess that's a good question.
Page count?
Yeah, word count or page count, either's fine.
I don't remember word count. I'm changing.
Oh, that's a nice looking book.
About 280 pages. Yeah, thanks.
280, not bad. Not super long, not super short. Perfect.
No, and I wanted it to be a relatively fast read, and especially since, as I said, there's a storyline in this particular one, and you're really drawn in mostly because you buy into the characters and you want to know what's going to happen to them. Book 2 is actually going to be a little different. There are actually 3 plot lines running at the same time.
Okay.
And because you already know the characters, I don't have to spend as much time on that. So I'm going to give you double dose of plot and really keep it moving.
Ooh, interesting. I like that you're changing it up, though. That just shows that you want to take the risks. You want to do the new thing sometimes. Yeah, and you got to do it because otherwise you're doing the same book again, right? You can't do that. Right. And if you not exactly the same.
Most entertainment we see on television or films and stuff, it's like, what are we on? Fast and the Furious?
9 would be the next one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm watching seasons of different things, and they're like season 12, season 13. At some point, it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 definitively plotted out. Well, one's already done. One started and plotted out, and then there's a third one, which is a potential. I got to see how this one plays out before I decide, because I don't have a problem killing off a character, and I don't have a problem ending it because there are 1,000,001 ideas. So, write the next book.
Yeah, you're not going to run out of ideas. That's not how that works.
Not going to run out of ideas, but I don't want to keep rehashing the same characters either. I want you to like the characters enough. Boy, I really like that. But it's over now. Okay, they would say
start something new.
Hungry, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as opposed to melting.
Yeah, if you're overdosed on the characters, if you overeat the characters, then what are you doing here? I mean,
Right.
at that point, and a lot of people now. I mean, there's an audience for the a never-ending series, and it frankly that's not the sort of stuff I'm going to write. Most likely, I mean, I could see it happening eventually, but not like former guest of this podcast, Michael Anderle, who he's a good guy, but I don't think I would want to write a series like his 26, 27 book series or whatever he's got going on.
But again, you say each author's different, and some people actually enjoy that. If they enjoy it and they can do a good job, then go for it. But me, no, I'd get bored. So it would be time to do something different.
Yeah, I bounce around too much. I mean, I've what is it, 5 series out and only 11 novels out. That's kind of how I roll.
Keep them waiting. Like we're having to wait till when is it? The end of this year for the final James Bond.
Of this iteration,
with the Daniel Craig, and then I've been watching Star Trek Picard, which was pretty good. I enjoyed the series, but obviously, he's aged dramatically. And then they had the second season, and it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, this is happening again? It's going to keep going?
2022.
Oh, 2022. Okay.
They filmed it last year, and it's like 2022. It's like,
we'll save it for later. Yeah, maybe. Hopefully that one will have a complete ending. I mean, it's kind of tough. You don't want to make an older actor, at least. You don't need to push him through the hoop all the time, over and over again. At this point, this is This is the bonus round for Patrick Stewart in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Maybe like
Not
that
to
third
mention,
bonus
again,
round.
how many different series have they come out with? They're still coming out with more. So that same kind of ideas. But no, I think you've got to, as a writer, you've got to enjoy it. It's got to be worth something to you. It should be a challenge. I think it should be a challenge.
Like Alan Moore. I think I quote this all the time. Alan Moore, one of my favorite quotes about writing, where he's like, unless you're not quite sure you can complete your book, you shouldn't necessarily write. I mean, you shouldn't write is what he said. I'd qualify it more, because sometimes you know what you can do. Sometimes but usually you need to be pushing yourself is basically the point of what he's saying there.
Yeah.
You should be pushing yourself a little bit beyond what you're sure you can do.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
I have folders full of stuff that have been started. I mean, got to page 50, 60 or whatever, and then for whatever reason, I didn't like the way the plot was going, or it didn't have what I thought was a decent enough continuation. They just got put aside. And one day, come back. Maxie, actually, the lead in this, started as a 1-paragraph short story. Gosh, I don't know how long ago, but quite a while ago. The opening sentence is almost actually identical. But I didn't know what to do with her. I didn't have something to do with her. And then when I started doing this, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's perfect for this. By the way, I wanted to mention a contest, if I may.
Sure.
I have on my website, and starts now, ends July 15th. People can enter. There's no charge or anything. I'm going to pick 4 winners, and they will be themselves in the next book as characters. I will. I'm going to interview them so they're realistic, and of course have them sign liability releases, and have them interact with the main characters. So I thought that might be kind of fun.
Oh, that is cool. We should definitely leave a link to that in the show notes.
It'll be on it's right on the website, and the main website, and make sure we do. So
awesome.
That should be fun.
Yeah.
That book's going to be out September.
Okay. So, geez, now I'm all lost thinking about the stuff people do, and you write real people into your books, or just red shirts or whatever people do. I mean, when I write fantasy, I'm kind of possessive about the names of the characters, actually, so I never do that. But it's interesting because to me that go back to what you were saying before about Maxie's starting out as a single paragraph story or whatever. It actually kind of happened to me. This year I finished a story that had been sitting on my shelf for 7 years. I had the first 200 pages, and then it took another 20 or 30 pages to finish it off. And I'm like, I thought it was going to be another 200 pages, and it was only like 30 more. I got done.
Yeah, never throw stuff away.
Yeah, I was so close to the ending, I didn't know what to do. It was weird.
Right.
Yeah,
right. And that's true. I mean,
I
think
just
that's
came
what
to me.
People call when I hear people talk about writer's block, and it's like, I don't get writer's block. I get writers not knowing what to do next. because if I'm stuck on something, I'll just do something else, and eventually, and it may not be writing. Like you just go for a walk, observing people is actually a fantastic way to break any kind of writer clog.
Yeah.
We call it writer clog.
Yeah. The other thing about
like a toilet clog. Yeah.
the thing that happens with me with a writer when I get clogged is often I'll just be bouncing off some part of the story. It's a lot like when I'm reading and I run into like I was telling you before, the stretch of passive voice or whatever it is that throws me out of the story. If I'm getting thrown out of my own story, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the problem. I need to get back in there and tear that apart. If I'm editing, that's when, or if I'm like I'm writing, I'm supposed to write this next scene and I don't want to. It becomes pretty apparent pretty fast because that scene just doesn't get written.
Right. And sometimes you got to walk away from it. I mean, you just have to get at that fresh vantage point. And I find oftentimes in the middle of the night, I'll be like, oh, that's what I should have done. And then go back and fix it.
Yeah, now it happens a lot when I'm driving. Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, now I know what I got to do.
Talk to yourself in the car?
Not so much. But it's just all in my head. But yeah. I get home and I'll write it down.
I'm so thankful for modern cell phone devices now because people don't ever look at you when you're talking in the car.
That's a good point. I mean, I would have to turn on the recorder, though, and turn off the music. Yeah. So, anyway. So, William, tell people where they can find your books and all your stuff online. It's been great having you.
Thanks. MrWriter.com, MisterWriter. I have to spell that for some people because I had a few people do MR instead of Mr. But everything is there. I have links and everything to all the previous stuff. I have all the contest stuff, some video stuff that I did before. So anything and everything's there. People can sign up on the VIP reader list and automatically be entered in all the contests. I like communications. I do my best to actually reply when people email. But anyway, I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun. And
it's always good to have new guests on. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Sound interesting guy.
Yeah, you too.
Well,
so I'll have to chase you up on Twitter now.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks once again to William Gensburger for being on the podcast. As for us, you can find more about the podcast, at mentalcellarpublications.com or at timniederreiter.com. Whichever of those you find the way to spell first, you may erase yourself. I'm not great at picking URLs, apparently. But you can also follow me on Twitter at tniederreiter, and you can find my Facebook page. That's Tim Niederreiter on Facebook, facebook.com/Tim Niederreiter. Again, if you can get past that first syllable in my last name, you'll be fine. But otherwise, that one's a little bit of a beast. I'm tired of telling people how to spell it, but it's Nied, not Neid. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week.
That tears it.